There's a specific moment, somewhere between day 3 and day 10 of your silence, where something quietly breaks in his head. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. It has almost nothing to do with you. That's not a typo. That's not me being dramatic. That's the thing I want you to understand before we go any further. Because everything I'm about to share only makes sense if you accept this one uncomfortable truth first. When a man becomes quietly obsessed with a woman who stopped contacting him, the object of his obsession isn't really her. It's something her absence revealed to him about himself. And once you understand that distinction, you stop performing for men entirely. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop sending the third message to clarify the second one. Because you realize the thing you were trying to earn through effort was something that could only ever be generated through its opposite. So let's go there. Let's go somewhere. Most relationship content won't take you, because most of it is stuck at the surface. You've heard the cliche 1,000 times. Men want what they can't have. Men chase what pulls away. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. And look, those sayings exist for a reason. There's a crumb of truth in them, but they are so shallow, so worn out, so repeated without understanding that they've become almost useless. They don't tell you why. They don't tell you what's actually happening in his mind. And worse, they flatten men into cartoon characters who respond to withdrawal, like dogs chasing a laser pointer. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening at all. What's actually happening is far more interesting, and honestly, far more human. Underneath the surface of, "he suddenly wants me again," there's a collapsing narrative. That's the phrase I want you to hold on to. A collapsing narrative. Because every man you've ever interacted with had a story running in the background about you, about him, about what the two of you were or weren't. And that story was stable as long as you kept participating in it. Your texts confirmed it. Your availability confirmed it. Your willingness to show up confirmed it. The second you stop, that story starts to fall apart. And the human brain, male or female, cannot tolerate a falling apart story. It will do almost anything to rebuild it. That's the layer under the cliche. But there's a layer under that one too. And this is the one I really need you to hear. Your silence doesn't make him think about you more. It makes him think about himself more. That's the engine. That's the whole thing. Obsession. The kind that haunts someone at 2 a.m. The kind that makes him draft 3 different versions of a message and delete all of them. The kind that makes him drive past a place he knows he won't see you, but hopes he somehow will. That kind of obsession isn't fueled by how wonderful you are. It's fueled by the questions your absence forces him to ask about himself. Why did I let her go? What did I miss? Who was I being when she decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore? What does it say about me that she's fine and I'm not? Those questions. Those are the ones that loop, and you are the screen those questions get projected onto. Now, with that foundation in place, I want to walk you through the 5 specific psychological mechanisms that turn a woman's silence into something a man can't stop revisiting. Not tricks, not games, just the real, observable architecture of what happens inside someone when the person they were taking for granted stops showing up. The first mechanism is the open loop his brain refuses to close. There's a concept in psychology called the Zeigarnik effect. It's the tendency of the human mind to remember unfinished tasks more vividly than completed ones. Waiters remember the orders they haven't delivered, not the ones they have. Students obsess over questions they got wrong, not the ones they aced. Our brains are designed to finish things. We are completion machines. And the second something is left open, it starts taking up mental real estate that grows the longer it stays unresolved. Here's where this meets your life. When you were texting him, explaining yourself, asking where things stood, getting lukewarm answers but still showing up, you were closing the loop for him. Every message you sent was a little period at the end of his sentence. He didn't have to wonder where you were, because you told him. He didn't have to wonder if he'd lost you, because you kept proving he hadn't. His brain never got to experience the itch of an unfinished story, because you kept handing him the ending. Then you stopped. And suddenly, the story has no ending. And his brain, being the completion machine it is, starts trying to write one itself. Is she mad? Is she moving on? Did she meet someone? Is she sitting there hoping I'll reach out? Is she actually fine without me? What does it mean that I don't know? Every silent day is a new paragraph in a story he's being forced to author alone, and he doesn't have the information he needs to write it. So he keeps revisiting, keeps checking, keeps trying. That's not romance. That's cognitive architecture. And knowing this isn't about weaponizing it, it's about realizing that every time you've reached out to resolve his uncertainty in the past, you were doing him a favor he didn't earn. The second mechanism is the value recalibration he never saw coming. Here's a strange thing about human perception. We don't actually evaluate the worth of something while we have it. We evaluate it while we're losing it, or after we've lost it. This is called loss aversion, and it's one of the most reliable patterns in behavioral psychology. The pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the equivalent thing. Read that again. Losing hurts twice as much as gaining feels good. What this means, practically, is that a man can be with you, spend time with you, receive your attention, laugh with you, be physically close to you, and still not accurately perceive your value. Not because he's callous. Because proximity dulls perception. It's the same reason people stop noticing the view out of a window they see every day. Nothing's wrong with the view. The brain just stops registering it as special. Your silence pulls the view. And suddenly he's standing at an empty window, and his brain does something automatic. It starts cataloging. The specific way you laughed at his dumbest joke. The fact that you actually remembered his sister's name. The text you sent when his mom was in the hospital. The little things he absorbed without noticing. They come back now, not one at a time, but in a flood, because his brain is trying to calculate what it just lost. And here's the part that's going to sting a little, in a useful way. He probably didn't know your worth while you were in front of him. It's not a character flaw, it's a human flaw, and it's one most people share. But he will know it when you're gone. That's not manipulation, that's physics. And the question you have to ask yourself is whether you want to keep being with someone who can only perceive you accurately in your absence, or whether what you actually deserve is someone whose perception of you doesn't require you to disappear to work properly. Let me be clear about something, because this is important. I'm not telling you to orchestrate disappearances as a strategy to get someone to love you correctly. That's exhausting and hollow, and it puts you right back in the position of performing. What I'm telling you is that when you naturally pull back because a dynamic is costing you, this recalibration will happen on its own, and you don't have to chase the result. You just have to honor the pullback. The third mechanism is the mirror effect, and this one is subtle, but once you see it everywhere. When you were around, in his messages, in his life, in his orbit, you were softening something. You might not even have realized it. Your presence was absorbing some of his sharper edges. Maybe he was a little insecure, and your attention steadied him. Maybe he was a little avoidant, and your consistent warmth made him feel safe without having to work for it. Maybe he was between purposes, between jobs, between versions of himself, and the fact that you saw him at all made him feel less lost. Whatever it was, your presence was doing work. Emotional work. Silent work. The kind of work that rarely gets acknowledged. Remove the presence, and that work stops. And now he's sitting alone with whatever the presence was softening. The insecurity, the avoidance, the drift, the version of himself he doesn't love. The self-image he could only sustain when someone was reflecting something flattering back at him. In other words, your absence becomes a mirror, and he doesn't always like what he sees. This is part of why men sometimes react to a woman's silence with behavior that seems totally out of proportion. Reaching out after months, showing up emotional, saying things they've never said before. It can feel, from the outside, like sudden growth. And sometimes it is. But often, what's actually happening is that the mirror got unbearable, and they're scrambling to put someone back in front of it so they don't have to keep looking. That's not love. Let me say that again. That's not love. That's relief-seeking. And one of the most important discernments you can develop as you navigate this is the difference between a man who is actually doing the work of becoming someone worth your return, and a man who just wants the mirror covered back up. The fourth mechanism is the one almost nobody talks about honestly: the ego wound that masquerades as longing. Here's something you might find uncomfortable, but it's true. A significant portion of what a man feels when a woman he took for granted goes silent is not, "I miss her." It's, "How did this happen to me?" It's his self-image taking a hit. It's the story he told himself, that he was the one with options, that she was lucky to have him, that he was doing her a favor by being unclear, that he had time to figure things out while she waited. That story dies. And when a story about yourself dies, it hurts. A lot. And the hurt can feel indistinguishable from missing someone. He might call it love. He might convince himself it's love. He might show up at your door believing it's love. But underneath, a portion of what he's feeling is the ache of a self-concept that just got contradicted by reality. He believed he was the one who would decide when things were over. He wasn't. That's a wound. And wounds generate behavior. I'm telling you this not to make you cynical, but to protect you. Because if you mistake an ego wound for real, integrated desire, you'll let someone back in who is going to lose interest again the moment their self-image is restored. They'll come back hot. You'll respond, the story of themselves as chosen gets rewritten, the wound closes, and the dynamic resets exactly to where it was before you went quiet. The way you tell the difference between ego wound and real desire is time, consistency, and specificity. Ego wound is loud, urgent, and self-focused. Real desire is patient, steady, and focused on you, on what you actually need, on what you've been telling him for months that he finally heard. One evaporates the moment you respond. The other gets deeper when you do. The fifth mechanism is the novelty of your new unreachability. There's a strange thing that happens when someone you knew becomes someone you can't reach. They become unknown again. Not because they've changed, but because the version of them that was familiar was the version you had access to. Without access, you start to wonder who they are now, what they're doing, who they're with, what they look like on a Tuesday afternoon when you have no way of knowing. The brain, faced with this unknown, doesn't sit quietly. It fills in the gaps. And because longing is the emotion driving the filling in, the gaps get filled with the most evocative possible imagery. He imagines you radiant. He imagines you laughing at someone else's jokes. He imagines you moved on, unbothered, thriving. Sometimes these imaginings are accurate, and sometimes they aren't. It doesn't matter. What matters is that in his head, you've become a character he doesn't fully know anymore. And that unfamiliarity is magnetic, because humans are wired to be drawn to mystery. The woman he knew was mapped, known, categorized. The woman you are now, in his head, is unmapped. And the unmapped version pulls at him in a way the mapped version didn't. This is why women who disappear and actually build something during the disappearance, who genuinely reshape their lives rather than just performing distance, exert such a different kind of gravity. They're not playing hard to get. They've become hard to know again. And being hard to know is, psychologically, one of the most compelling states a person can occupy. All right? Let's bring this together, because there's a quiet truth underneath all 5 of these mechanisms that I don't want you to miss. None of what I just described is manipulation. Read that carefully. None of it. There's no trick here, no game, no dark strategy. What I described is what happens, naturally and inevitably, when one person stops participating in a dynamic that was costing them. The open loop, the recalibration, the mirror, the ego wound, the novelty. These aren't effects you engineer. They're consequences of you choosing yourself. They happen whether you want them to or not. They happen because human psychology is designed to respond to loss, and silence is, functionally, a form of loss for the person on the receiving end. Quick note before I go further, because it matters. Everything I'm saying here assumes a fundamentally healthy context. If you're in a situation involving manipulation, coercion, emotional abuse, or anything that's made you feel unsafe, what I'm describing isn't a strategy for your situation. That situation calls for support, for professional guidance, for protecting yourself first. Please don't map what I'm saying here onto a dynamic that requires something different. Okay, so if this isn't manipulation, and these effects happen on their own, what does that leave you with? What do you actually do with this information? Here's what I want you to do. And this is where we stop talking about him and start talking about you, because that's where the real power is anyway. First, stop measuring your silence by his reaction. This is the trap that ruins the whole thing. Women go silent, and then they spend the silence checking their phone, checking his social media, checking whether the silence is working. If you're measuring whether it's working, you're not actually silent. You're performing silence while remaining fully engaged in the dynamic internally. And he will feel that energetically, because nothing about you has actually changed. The point of withdrawing isn't to produce an outcome in him. The point is to produce an outcome in you. Second, make the silence useful on your side. Every day that you don't reach out is a day that could be spent depositing something into the life you actually want. One concrete thing. One class you've been putting off. One friend you've been meaning to call. One walk you didn't take because you were waiting for a response. Replace the waiting with one specific action per day. Write it down the night before. Do it the next day. This isn't about keeping busy to distract yourself. It's about using the time the relationship was consuming to become someone whose life isn't shaped around anyone's response. Third, practice not reacting when and if he does come back. This is the hardest part, because there's a part of you that's been waiting for it. When the message comes, pause. Don't reply immediately. Don't reply from the part of you that's been starving. Ask yourself one question. Is what he's offering now specifically different from what he was offering before? Or is it the same thing in a more desperate wrapper? If it's the same thing louder, that's the ego wound talking. If it's something specifically different, something that answers the exact concerns you had, something consistent over time, not just in one burst, that might be real. Give yourself permission to take days to answer. Real change doesn't evaporate in 48 hours. Fourth, notice what you learn about yourself in the quiet. This might be the most important one. A lot of women discover, in the silence, how much of their energy was going toward managing someone else's comfort. How much of their bandwidth was occupied by interpreting his moods, anticipating his needs, softening his rough edges. When that bandwidth comes back to you, you start to feel things you haven't felt in a long time. Your own thoughts, your own desires, your own pace. Don't rush through this. This is the real gift of going silent, not the reaction you get from him, the reunion you get with yourself. So here's what I want to leave you with, because I know some part of you is still hoping this was going to be a video about how to get him to come back, and maybe he will. That happens. It happens often, for all the reasons I just described. But if that's the only reason you came here, I want to gently suggest that you listen to this one more time with different ears. Because the real story isn't that men obsess over women who stop contacting them. The real story is that women who stop contacting men are often, for the first time in a long time, remembering that they exist on their own. They're remembering what their life felt like before it got organized around a phone. They're remembering the sound of their own thoughts without someone else's voice layered over them. They're remembering that they had desires and plans and a sense of humor and a pace that was theirs. And something about that remembering is magnetic. To him, yes, sometimes. But more importantly, to you. You become magnetic to yourself. And a woman who is magnetic to herself doesn't need to orchestrate anyone else's obsession, because she's no longer organizing her life around being chosen. She's organizing it around choosing. And that, more than any psychological mechanism I could describe, is the actual reason everything shifts. If you've been the one always initiating, always reaching, always smoothing things over, always carrying the emotional weight of two people while only one of you was showing up, there's a version of you underneath all that effort that is quietly, patiently waiting for you to stop long enough to meet her. She's not angry. She's not bitter. She's just tired of being the understudy in her own life. And the moment you stop pouring yourself into a dynamic that was draining you, she gets to come forward. That's who he'd be coming back to anyway, if he comes back. And that's who you get to be, regardless of whether he does. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what happened in your silence. What did you discover about yourself that you hadn't noticed before? What came back to you when you stopped giving it away? Your story might be the exact thing someone scrolling past this needs to read today. So don't underestimate what sharing it could do. And if this shifted something for you, if something in it landed, subscribe and stay close. We're going deeper into this territory in upcoming videos, and the conversations we're going to have are ones you won't want to miss. I'll see you in the next one.